Joining us now, our CAA Hoops insider, Eamonn Brennan. And Eamonn, this conference, the last 2 weeks continues to show the competitiveness. I mean, just looking at Saturday's results, JMU pushing Delaware to the brink, UNCW knocking off William & Mary, and Elon with a victory at Charleston. Just talk about the conference tournament, coming up and how crazy it can be and the potential it has to be one of the most entertaining conference tournaments in the country.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it all season long, really, about a league. Sort of when we first were getting our arms around the league, we were talking about, there being this tight cluster of teams at the top and how it could be an interesting title race. And as we've gone throughout, we thought maybe a team like William & Mary would emerge when they started off the season so well, but no, it's this league is crazy this year, and I think if you look at the conference standings right now, it tells you everything you need to know. I mean, Hofstra is a half game out ahead of Charleston, two teams that we thought would be competing for the conference title, but then you've got Delaware at 8-4, Towson at 8-5, William & Mary's now at 8-5, and the teams of the likes of Drexel, Northeastern, Elon, in ways that we didn't expect. So. There is still that tight cluster at the top, but other than that, what we've expected from this league has not always borne out. And honestly, it's probably better for it. Like you mentioned, given the stakes, involved with the conference tournament coming up later this year, the prospect of a team that, or a league that's crazy in the regular season, I think bodes well in terms of entertainment value for a conference tournament with an NCAA tournament bid on the line.
And as you mentioned, the conference standings, where things stand as of today, Hofstra holds that half-game lead over Charleston, and they play on Thursday night on the CBS Sports Network. Just talk about the Pride a little bit. How have they been so consistent as of late?
Well, Isaac Conte, as a big, has really helped out, give them more consistent post play from a team that's primarily guards otherwise, and 4 out, 1 in. I think a big part of the reason beyond his performance is the ability to play 5 starters, consistent big minutes, spread scoring around between Deshaun Bowie and Eli Pemberton, and then you have to credit Deshaun Bowie specifically. Pemberton's been really good all season. He's scored at about the rate he scored a year ago. Really consistent guy, and that's why Hofstra has been still looking like maybe the best team in the league. I think you have to put down to the consistent performance they've gotten from Deshaun Bowie.
And once again, Hofstra will take on the College of Charleston Thursday night on the CBS Sports Network. Moving on to another team, the team that's currently has the longest winning streak in the CAA at 6 is the Delaware Blue Hens. They've played very well as of late, Eamonn.
I think there was a rough patch in January specifically, but working guys into the roster, figuring things out. Brought in Dylan Painter from Villanova. He's evolved and sort of integrated really well. Nate Darling has been fantastic pretty much all year. Really effective guy who plays a ton of minutes, has to carry a big sort of burden offensively and does so really capably. And I think part of it now is as Martin Inglesby has referred to in recent years, or in recent days rather, essentially that they're a little bit older now. They've recruited well. They've gotten good players to Delaware, but they've had to sort of gradually put them all together and get a little bit older together. I think you're seeing that now, and you're seeing consistent performances in the league, having won 6 games in a row.
And, of course, the Blue Hens doing a great job of finishing games. 4 of their last 6 games decided in the final seconds. So that should bode well for Delaware as we hit this crazy conference tournament coming up in March. Now moving on to Elon, a team that, that has kind of been very quiet throughout the season, now has won 3 straight games. The Phoenix now realistically have a shot at getting out of the last 4 and avoid playing in the first round of the tournament.
Yeah, nice little boost for Elon here, sort of midway, late through the season. After starting 1-7 in league play, and really, I think everybody expected, Elon included, and first-year coach Mike Schrage included, a sort of rebuilding year, figure out who we are. Lots of really interesting young players that we've talked about a lot in these segments. Hunter Woods, Hunter McIntosh, Zach Irvin, freshmen who form what you would expect would be the core of an improving Elon team over the next 2, 3, 4 years. But they're a little bit ahead of schedule, at least late in the league here, and they're looking at we've talked about the importance of seeding in the CAA tournament in the past, it's absolutely vital, and put, sort of get yourself a little bit further into the bracket without having to play a game. It's massive. And Elon has put themselves in a position where it's not unrealistic. And given where they are, start of the season, start of the conference season even, it's a pretty huge accomplishment.
Elon Phoenix surging as of late, being led by the CAA co-player of the week this week in Marcus Sheffield. And speaking of players, let's move on to our player spotlight segment today. Let's begin with Nathan Knight. Once we've talked about him a lot on these segments here as of late. Right now, leading the country in double doubles. How do you see him stacking up as some of these postseason awards start to be distributed here in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, other than Iowa's Luka Garza, maybe, I think he's probably the best center in the country. Nathan Knight absolutely stacks up in terms of statistically, in terms of his importance to his own team. He's rightfully getting a lot of attention as possibly one of the 2 or 3 best big men in the country. And
Nathan Knight being named a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award finalist. We'll see how those awards come out here in a few weeks. And another player who has been outstanding in this league and throughout his career, and we've talked about him many times, is Grant Riller, as he wraps up his senior season here, and he'll be looking to play even at the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. My colleague at The Athletic, Sam Vecini, just had his most recent draft rankings for the 2020 draft released not too long ago, and he had Grant Riller as the number 39th player on his board, which is pretty impressive. That's a solid early second round pick, really. And I don't think it's super surprising. I think if you look at Grant Riller's game, I think you look at what he's able to do, translates, I would think, really well to the next level in terms of great ball handling ability, great scoring from the lead guard position, can probably play a solid amount of point guard at the next level given his size, his quickness, his handle, but also his ability to find teammates, to get around screens, to get at the rim, go downhill. It's all really impressive stuff. And I think you look at him and you look at a season that, in a lot of ways, sort of the player of the year race, especially coming into the year with Cassius Winston from Michigan State, Marcus Howard at Marquette, the leading scorer in the country, and Miles Powell from Seton Hall, who a lot of people's player of the year. You look at Grant Riller and sort of stack him up, and I think he's right there with those guys if you look at them statistically. So it's been a really impressive season. Not a surprise that he's also being mentioned as an NBA, a potential NBA pick in whatever stage of the draft this coming summer. He's been that good for much of his career, and especially this year.
Another player having a fantastic season is Jordan Roland from Northeastern, and he continues to put on a show, especially from behind the arc. And even this past Saturday, I remember the highlight right at the end to keep the Huskies in the game was a left-handed three-point shot that really was incredible. It was definitely a top 10 play of the day. Just Jordan Roland and his efficiency has been incredible all season long, Eamonn.
Yeah, I mean, and we're sort of running out of words to describe. We're sort of running out of honorifics for Jordan Roland, but I think we can add a new one and say that he's got a Larry Bird-esque level of ambidextrous shooting to his game as well. Crazy shot and a crazy performance, and one that we've gotten used to. I mean, he is just flat out one of the best shooters in the country. He's at 42%, 42.3% from three on 182 attempts. So a really high number, shooting a really high percentage. Hasn't lost anything in the transfer in terms of, more shots, more attempts, more usage. Just such an efficient player. He's been a really fun player to watch all year. He's one of those guys whose box scores are fun to look at because they're tidy, but also impressive. He's had a great season.
And another player who has had a great season, and you could argue if there was an award for most improved player in the conference, is Alan Tran from Towson. He's had an incredible season, 31 points recently at Drexel. What have you seen from Alan's game this year?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's really expanded his game. You look at him last year, and he was averaging somewhere in the, around 5 points per game, and this year coming into the season, and you actually look at where he's at right now, averaging around 15 points per game. A big step up for a Towson team that we kind of weren't sure where they were going to be this year, but he's giving them something not only to build on for next season and where they're, in theory would be sort of over the long term, but but something to really be impressed by and dwell on for this season as well.
And the last pair of players that we'll talk about today currently play on the two teams that are the hottest teams in the CAA as of today. And we'll begin with Bowie of Hofstra. And we've talked about him a lot. We've talked especially his defensive game, but really the emergence of his offensive game this year has been very impressive.
But Bowie has really elevated his game from, the defensive player of the year in the conference last year to a guy who needed to take a big step forward in terms of his scoring, his distribution, and being sort of the star player on the team on both ends of the floor. And he's absolutely done that. He's had a conference player of the year level campaign. Whether he'll win it with some of the other players in this league, I don't know. But his ability to be an all-core offensive player, to score it, to distribute, and to really sort of run Hofstra's offense has been incredible. It's the reason why I think if you were going to pick maybe sort of a favorite right now, you'd probably lean toward Hofstra. It's still a wide open league, but I think Bowie has made them feel like maybe a bit more of a sure thing than some of the other teams in this league. We'll see, but either way, he's been incredible.
And then the last player that we'll spotlight today, Nate Darling from Delaware. The Blue Hens on a 6-game winning streak. And part of the reason, or a big part of the reason, has been Nate Darling, one of the 3 transfers making an immediate impact for this Blue Hen team this year. And Eamonn, he loves to shoot behind the arc.
He does. We've talked about Jordan Roland's number of attempts, 182, shooting 40, almost 43%. Nate Darling says, "Hold my beer." And shoots around 200. I think he's above 200 3-point attempts on the season already. So not a guy who's afraid to get his shots up, and also really effective. If you shoot that often but are still up around the 40% mark, which he is, right around 39% from beyond the arc, that is a ton of you can do the math. That's a ton of points you're putting up on a fairly regular basis. And I think for this Delaware team, there are times when their offense really needs that. And, you have a guy who is totally willing to take on those big shots, has really, really deep range. It's just it's a skill set and a style that coaches can really lean into it. And I think Delaware kind of leans into it and really gets the most out of a guy who really puts up a lot of shots, but again, is very productive in doing so.
Eamonn Brennan joining us, wrapping up today. Eamonn, the CAA as a whole, in the Ken Palm ratings and in other ratings, just one of the more offensive, high-efficiency leagues in the country, and a lot of it has to do with these players. How could that just really kind of spark interest nationwide as it comes up to the conference tournament?
Yeah, look, it has not been a particularly good year for offensive basketball in college basketball as a whole. If you sort of look at efficiency numbers across the board, they've been way down all year. There are some outliers, like the Gonzagas of the world are a really good offensive team, and so on and so forth. But sort of Division I college basketball offensively has been way down all year. Not necessarily the case in the Colonial. I think, we talked about these guys, the best players in the league: Jordan Roland, Bowie, Nate Darling, Grant Riller, Nathan Knight, go up and down the list. And primarily there are good defenders in that mix for sure, and there are good defensive teams and defensive performances in this league. But by and large, the thing that attracts you to these players is what they're doing on the offensive end. And you look at their teams, there are 3 top 100 offensive efficiency teams in the league. I think there's 3 more that are in the top 130, 140. So if you're tuning into the CAA, you're going to see offensive basketball. A lot of times you're going to see decent tempo. But most of all, you're going to see really efficient scoring, and that's not something you can necessarily say about the rest of Division I this season. That's for sure.
Okay, Eamonn Brennan, thank you for joining us today. Our CAA men's basketball insider. Should be a fun stretch here the final few weeks of the regular season.
Sure thing. You bet, man.